we're going to do for loops now. I'm just going to jump straight into showing you sort of what it is and give you a basic example of it. And then afterwards, we'll go into what it's good for and how we can use it. So yeah, how we write this: for let I equal 0, I minus I is less than number of loops I plus plus. Okay. So this is a lot to take in just without me explaining anything, so I'll just go through it bit by bit. I'll create a variable number of loops, set that equal to 4. So for this is a loop, so we say we create a variable called I, and this is just a variable name. This can be any variable name, my counter, my variable, counter, anything, but we often see I because it stands for index. So yeah, we just create a variable I is equal to 0. And then the second part is we want to loop while I is less than this number that we passed in. So 4. This could just be like 4. So while I is less than 4, we want to loop. And then the last one is what we want to do to I every time we loop. And we've seen this before. Plus plus just means increment or increase by 1. So every time this loops, I will get 1 larger, and then while it is less than 4, it will do whatever's inside these curly brackets. So yeah, let's just go through it again. The first part sets up the basically a loop variable, a counter of sorts. The last part is what do we want to do to the counter every time this loops, and we will increase by 1. And then every time it loops, the middle part is when will it stop? When do we want to stop looping, or when do we want to keep looping, I guess is the better way of saying it. Because while I is less than the number 4, or let's just put the variable back in, while I is less than this size, keep performing the code inside these curly brackets. And the curly brackets, we've seen this before. This is like the end of a function where anything within here is just a block of code that will be executed. So yeah, every time we loop, perform the code inside these brackets. So let's just show you an example so you can see what it's doing. We'll console log hello world. Okay, how do I how do I undo the collapsing? There we go. Okay, so you can see here we have console logged hello world 4 times. So let's look through the logic again. We'll run through this logically. I starts at 0 and we loop through the first time. So we console log this out. And then we add 1 to I, so I becomes 1. And then we loop again and it console logs this. So the reason it prints out 4 times is because I goes through 0, 1, 2, 3, and then when it becomes 4, it stops looping. So it will perform this code 4 times. And just so you can see that visually as well, let's console log I. There we go. So here is the progress of I. 0, 1, 2, 3, and once it becomes 4, the code tells it, do not run again. So you can do something a number of times, or you can do the same thing a number of times. So why is that useful? Well, say we have an array, and we'll say it's A, B, and C. So there's our array, A, B, and C. And what if we wanted to console log each item inside this array? So we wanted A, B, and C to be console logged for us to read. Well, we can just do console log my array 0. And I hope you remember this. This will just say take the 0th index, which is the first one, and then grab the contents that are there. So it'll say go into my array, grab the first thing, and then console log that out. And then you can repeat that. So you say my array, and then we can repeat that again. So there we go. It should say A, B, and C. There we go. So why do we need the loop then if we can just do that? What if we don't know the size of the array? We may not know how many things are in here, how many values are inside the array. So instead, what we can do is create our loop, let I equal 0, because we want to start at the start. I is less than. This is the important part. We have certain properties that belong to an array that we can use. And one of them is dot length. So this dot length will now tell us the size of this array, or how many values are inside. So my array dot length will return 3. So we can use that instead of this number of loops, or instead of hard coding it or whatever. We can dynamically change how many times we want to loop based on the size of an array. So we'll just finish this off, I++, because we want to increase by 1 every time we loop. So yeah, logically, you can see why this is exciting. If we now console log, we can use my array, and then how do we access each part of this, each value? Well, we have this I variable that increases by 1 every time, and it starts at 0. We can just use I. We can put a variable in there. And so now, let's follow it through logically before we test it. I starts at 0, and we say console log my array 0, which will be A. And then we say, okay, increase by 1. So I is now 1, console log my array 1, it gives us B. And then we'll do it again for 2, it will get C. And then when it goes to 3, well, we have reached the length. I is no longer less than my array.length, it is equal to, and so it won't run again, it'll stop. So let's just test that. there we go. A, B, and C. The same result as before, but now we can add D, we can add E, we can even add F. And without having to manually type out console log my array sort of 3, 4, and 5, we can just run the same code and it can already handle printing that to the screen. So let's put this into sort of game terms, as we like to do. Let's make class enemy, and then we'll make a constructor, and we'll pass in a name and health. We'll say this dot name equals name. This dot health equals health. So then we can set up two different enemies. We'll say let zombie equal new enemy. And we need to pass in a name. We'll say zombie, and a health. We'll say 10. And then let wolf equal new enemy wolf, and give it 5. So we've seen this sort of thing before. We just creating a class, adding a constructor, so this runs when the object is created. We'll create two objects based on this enemy class. We pass in some values that are then assigned to the object. So now, if we have an array of targets, and we'll say zombie and wolf are both targets, then we can use this this for loop. Say I equals 0, I is less than targets.length, because we want to perform some action on each of the targets, and then I increments. So in here we can say let target equal targets I. So all we're doing here is using this array and using the counter or the index, and we are storing the target that we find inside of a variable. And then we can do something like target dot health minus equals maybe 1, because we've hit them once. So this is us dealing damage to an array of targets. And then we will console log zombie and console log wolf at the end. You could add it inside the loop, but let's just keep the loop clean. So when we first create zombie and wolf, we'll console log out just to make sure it looks how we want it to look. Then we have a list of targets, loop through the list of targets and do some damage to the health, and then we console log at the end just so we can compare and see what happened. Right, so zombie and wolf start off with 10 health and 5 health. We do some damage to them, and now he has 9 health and 4 health. So you can see why looping is very useful. You don't need to know how many times you want to loop. Sometimes you do, but you don't have to know. Well, I guess it depends on what you're trying to do. But anyway. There are other ways of writing a for loop. So let's just see. There is something where we do for x in y and for x of y. So these essentially do the same kind of thing as the previous for loop, but it's just written in a different way. So if you have an array like y, we can say for value in array. This is maybe a better way of visualizing it. What we're saying is loop through everything in this array, and value will be the value for each loop. So if you can imagine I is equal to 0, and then it becomes 1, then it becomes 2, and then we use that index in the array like we did with the targets example. Well, value just becomes the 0th value in array, and then the next time it loops, value becomes the first the first index. Then the next time, value becomes the second. So let's just make that visual. We'll do targets again. There's our zombie and there's our wolf. So the first time we loop through targets, this should be of, by the way, not in. This should be of. The first time we loop through, value will be zombie. The second time we loop through, value will be wolf. So we don't, I won't be doing too much more of these two in this video because there are intricacies that we'll need to go over, and you probably need to know a bit more about objects and things before we do this. But I did want to show you the different syntax just in case you see it in the code and you're wondering, hey, that looks different from what I was told in this video. So these are different ways of writing for loops, and it still essentially does the same thing. You will loop through a certain number of times and perform an action. And let's look through some RPG Maker code. So the first one I want to do is apply item. Is it in here? There we go. So scene item base, apply item. In here we can see both examples of the for that I was talking about. We don't want to look too much into this one. It's the one I was talking about. We'll do in another video. But I guess at a glance you can see target is the value of each loop, and this is what you're looping through, the target actors. But the more important one I want to go into is the one below, which is like the first lot of syntax that I showed you. So action.numRepeats. We're starting at 0. We're looping this many times, and then we just increment by 1 each time. And every time we loop, we are applying whatever this action is to the target. So we're talking about items. Be aware that this might also apply to skills, I think. But let's just talk about items for now. So let's check out the database. We'll go to items and look at potion. We have this repeat input box here. It says 1, but you can make that 2 or 3, whatever. And so this code is essentially saying whatever number that is, say it's 1, we want to loop through 1 time and apply the item to the target. So if that number was 2, that means we'll say loop through 0 and 1 2 times and apply this action to the target twice. So this is a working example of a for loop that is based on what we know about RPG Maker. Let's go for another one, which was the one on here. Equip status, and then it's draw all params. So let's have a look at the equip screen. Oh, where is that coming from? X is not defined. So that. Okay, so let's go to the equip window, equip status. So here is the equip status window, and here are parameters being drawn to the screen. So let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 parameters. We go back to the code and we see it is looping to the number 6. Keep in mind this says I is less than 6, but it starts at 0. So that's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 times this will loop. And all the code is doing is saying get a position on the screen that we want to draw this, and then draw item. Essentially, draw item just draws one parameter to the screen in the position you tell it to. And so draw all params is saying loop 6 times and draw these 6 different parameters onto the screen. Pretty cool, huh? What are some honorable mentions? What should I be talking about? Yeah, sometimes you will see, you know, I'll make another for loop just to show you. Yeah, sometimes you might want to start with the highest number. So you'll say, start off with I being equal to the target's dot length, and usually you put in -1 there, and I'll talk about why, but yeah, it's a logic thing. So I starts off as the bigger number, and then I can be greater than or equal to 0, and then you'll say I minus minus. So again, just look, talk through it logically. You start off with target's dot length -1. So what is that? The length is 2, so I starts off at 1. And you say, I want to loop while I is greater than or equal to 0. So if I starts at 1, you minus 1 every time you loop. So I will be 1 to begin with. Then the next time it loops, I will be equal to 0. And the next time it loops, it will be equal to -1. But -1 is not greater than or equal to 0, so it won't loop that time. It will only run twice, which gives the same result. We loop through, but instead of it starting with zombie and then wolf, it will start with wolf, which is targets 1, and then it will go to targets 0. So you're working your way back through an array. You're doing it in reverse. Sometimes this is useful. Yeah, you'll probably come across it at some point. Another honorable mention is that this doesn't have to be increasing or decreasing by 1. You can do something else here. You can do like I plus 2, I believe, and it means that you skip every second index. I don't know why. I've not seen this very often, but maybe it's valid. Maybe you might need it sometime. So yeah, that's for loops in a nutshell. You will probably see a lot of this kind of thing, but more likely the other two versions where it's for x in y or for x of y. But yeah, we will get to that in another video. So here is how you loop in a normal sense. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.